Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of Labrie, Auger, for making me the instrument of their wishes. And no doubt in consonance with my fundamental responsibilities as their member of parliament, I am expected to debate the course of this government, its taxation policies, its economic policies, of course, the document, estimates of revenue and expenditure, the economic and social review, etc., etc. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my voice to a very important discourse. And in all my years in this House, this is the worst I have seen the estimates. And as I navigate my brief presentation, you will appreciate the gravity of the situation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must say that a casual glance at those estimates will reveal that planlessness is in the driver's seat. But you see, members opposite can beat their chest and insult members on this side of the House. And I must say I'm very impressed and proud with my colleagues, how they handle criticism and abuse from the other side with such grace. It does not matter how loud they speak and how hard they beat their chest. The facts remain, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, casual glance at the 2018 estimates of revenue and expenditure will reveal that members opposite are busy celebrating a very poor fiscal and economic management of the country. And there is no valid reason for the Prime Minister to celebrate. Mr. Speaker, I remember when I addressed this Honorable House in 2017, I said that the Prime Minister at the time, presenting his very first budget to this Honorable House, was akin to the most junior pilot in the cockpit of Air France 447, from Rio to Paris. And this particular junior pilot placed the aeroplane in a climb, stalled the aircraft, descending at more than 10,000 feet per minute. And all 228 passengers on board perished. Mr. Speaker, when all the pilot had to do was to maintain level flight and go around the storm. And today, the very same concern addressed in 2017, it's really like a nightmare today, Mr. Speaker. For example, the 2018 Economic and Social Review on page 8 states, preliminary estimates indicate that real GDP growth slowed to 1.5% in 2018, following revised growth of 3.3% in 2017. Notwithstanding expansions in most other sectors, including tourism, agriculture and manufacturing, a downturn in the construction sector dampened overall GDP growth. Unquote. Mr. Speaker, growth decelerated to 1.5% because the Prime Minister stopped the construction projects that would have caused growth and an expansion in the construction sector, Mr. Speaker, and concentrated instead on pet projects like DSH. DSH, which is of no developmental, environmental, social, or economic value to this country. So, Mr. Speaker, no amount of beating of chest can refute the fact that growth decelerated in 2018 because the Minister for Finance interfered with economic recovery by stopping many projects that would have generated growth in the economy. All he had to do, like the junior pilot in the cockpit, was to allow the projects that he inherited from the former SLP administration to continue economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, it is a good time to give careful and sensible treatment to this issue. Mr. Speaker, the 2018 Economic and Social Review states on page 18, Preliminary estimates show that the construction sector contracted by 21.2% in 2018, following real growth in the previous years. And in the previous years, inheriting from the previous SLP administration, we had some hotels under construction, and so it continued to fuel construction activity in the country. And that has come to a halt, and construction is contracting in this country like it's nobody's business. The downturn was driven by significantly lower levels of construction activity in both the private sector and the public sector. As a key indicator of construction activity, the value of total imports of construction materials declined by 20.5% to $159.9 million in 2018. Similarly, the number of persons employed in the sector is estimated to have declined by 10.4% in 2018. Mr. Speaker, this morbid scenario is the making of the Prime Minister and his chosen cabal. So why are they in the chamber pretending that they have worked some magic and they have been involved in prudent fiscal management of this country? It continued on page 18, and I quote, "Consistent with lower foreign direct investment, construction activity in the private sector decreased during the review period relative to 2017. Hotel and commercial construction contracted in 2018, while the level of residential construction remained flat, as evidenced by a marginal decrease of 0.2% in commercial bank lending for home construction." So, Mr. Speaker, if this government did not interfere with the range project, there would have been an expansion in construction activity. If they didn't go and interfere with the range project, there would have been construction activity in that area. So foreign direct investment declined because of interference by this government, and they claim to be involved in prudent management. The Sabisha in Choiseul, the Amerindian settlement, and the member for Choiseul is present in this honorable house. This is a neighboring constituency. In fact, part of his constituency is in Labrie geographically. And so I also have responsibility for a particular fraction of his constituency and beyond. So, Mr. Speaker, I am quite concerned that the South, which has been considered a backwater by members opposite, continue to suffer the discrimination and oppression. Mr. Speaker, if they had continued with the projects at Canal, we would not be in that situation. So this is why it's very easy for one to comprehend that it was homegrown. The contraction in construction was homegrown. It was created by them. And I do not know why they are beating the chest, because growth decelerated in this country. Further, Mr. Speaker, the 2018 Economic and Social Review on page 19 states, there was also a reduction in the level of construction activity on commercial projects during the review period relative to 2017. Construction works commenced on the horse race track and stables as part of phase 1 of DSH Holdings Limited project in Beaufort, unquote. Mr. Speaker, clearly, with all the pronouncements about DSH, with all the money that is being spent desecrating the Beausejour area, where is the construction activity in the area? Mr. Speaker, this DSH Papi show has failed to generate the hundreds of jobs that the Prime Minister promised. Are we at all surprised that on page 9 of the Economic and Social Review, that it states, despite the expansion in economic activity, the unemployment rate remained unchanged relative to 2017 at an average of 20.2% in 2018. With all that money that has been borrowed since this government got into office, there should have been an abundance of growth in the economy. We have never borrowed like that, Mr. Speaker. And if you borrow and you spend in the economy, there must be economic growth. There must be economic growth. There's no magic to that. But where is the growth? they're down by Beausejour flogging a dead horse. DSH is a dead horse. Dead horse. But to compound the problem, Mr. Speaker, on page 569 of the 2019-2020 estimates of revenue and expenditure, head 43, section 41, subsection 13, line 0103, Larishu's Viewfort Road diversion. $13.5 million has been allocated to build a road to facilitate a horse racetrack for Teoaking. While Sir Alan Louis Street in Labrie remain in a deplorable condition. High Street, Labrie. The Carter Road is in a deplorable condition. The Majomel Road is in a deplorable condition. The Debois Road is in a deplorable condition. The Wavin-Pont-Carter Road, Mont-Leblanc. But we have $14-point-something million facilitating Teoaking and some nonsense that is doing there. Mr. Speaker, there was nothing wrong with the existing road. They wanted to repave it, fine. But Teoaking said he did not want the road to be higher than his racetrack. So we have expended monies building a road around the track, encroaching on an area that we're supposed to be preserving for airport expansion. And then this government says it cares about St. Lucia, cares about the people of the South, Mr. Speaker. And I want to invite the Honorable Member for Castries North and the Minister for Infrastructure that I see you have 11 million, in fact $11.4 million on the recon and rehab, I think it was, to do my roads for me. You know, the Carter Road, we have been in dialogue for a very long time, and I'm hoping this year, through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping this year that the member for Castries North, because Laborians pay taxes, that would, of course, come and engage in some road work, so that next time I come to this Honorable House, I have something good to report about your ministry doing what it's supposed to do in my constituency. Sometimes I see the silting work and I see shanty being built and I see a few other things that are going through the parliamentary representative. But one thing I must say, Mr. Speaker, one thing I must say, I'm always happy when Laborians get work to do. I'm always happy. I think it's disrespectful, like the leader of the opposition has said, that you all do things in constituency, sometimes around the 7 weeks vacation. You have people who run for elections and did not win, have all types of you know, vouchers distributing to people. Now, I am hoping that one day that this will change. But you see, the man who's standing in this Honorable House, the instrument of the wishes of my people, will always represent them, irrespective of the turbulence of the politics, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on page 576, head 46, section 001, subsection 1, line 45, I see an amount of $164,654 has been allocated for village tourism. We in Labrie, Mr. Speaker, we have always been helping ourselves. And I've said that before. We do not cry about the neglect of UWP. When the Labour Party is in office, we do things. We build the Burns Road, we build the Lacqua Road, we build the Testone Highway Road, we go to Laho, we build roads in all different areas in Auger. Auger alone, I built more than 11 concrete roads to improve the lives of the people there. We do things. We build our own credit union for us to chart our own development. So we are not like leeches. We want to live symbiotically with government. Government must play their part, and we play our part. I never believe in an over-dependence on government budget. And when we are playing our part, don't try to punish us. And so we have taken the initiative to develop some very important programs for village tourism. And I'm hoping, although that amount is a little cacadan compared to what we know, but at least the minister or the prime minister can consult with the honorable member for Labrie and see how they can benefit from the tax money. Mr. Speaker, I am also very concerned that the Labrie market, which was in the 2014-2015 estimates of revenue and expenditure. And again, in the 2014-2015 estimates of revenue and expenditure has disappeared for the third consecutive year under this government. For the third consecutive year, I think it came on the head 47. We had already designed our market. There was public consultation about the market. The money was in the estimates, and that was not money we had to go and raise via bonds, you know. It wasn't money to be raised via bonds. But the same 2016, the United Workers' Party got into office. And they just allowed the year to come to a close, and they removed it from the budget. And I have always said, Mr. Speaker, every time the Labour Party is in office, we do things. Every time UWP gets into office, what they find, they destroy, or they do not honor it, and then they do nothing for us. I want to see the Laborian that will have the courage to come and ask the people of Labrie to vote for that type of situation, that type of arrangement. We shall flog that individual with the whip of Laborian pride. And I can pledge today that as a soldier, I shall stand and defend my people with my life. That is how you represent. You lead by example. I say nobody ahead of me and I'm at the back, you know. I lead my troops into battle. And I do not believe in sabotage either. I deal with things frontally. And when you are in the context of Labrie, it is within the framework of our integrated whole. And it's Operation Calcimation, Mr. Speaker. No, we don't engage in that. I'm not a violent man. I'm a peace-loving man, but firm. On the head 48 on pages 580 to 581, where it talks about proud. And I heard the member for Castle South East talking about proud. It was the member for Beaufort South who has lands at Cantonment, and I have at Pom, Auger, Black Bay, and the LEZ in Labrie. We had it in Proud the first time around when we were in government. I was not yet a member of parliament, but I was proud to give people access to a piece of their own heritage. When the United Workers' Party got into office in 2006, they removed it. And when we returned in 2011, we reprogrammed the Proud so that we can go ahead and give the people a piece of their own country. And so we did all the work, Mr. Speaker. We did all the surveys, and I'm asking that the member for Castle South East expedite. And we said at the time that the same way that the people of Demon benefited from lower prices, the same way that the people of PI benefited from lower prices, you cannot come to my people and ask them to pay market prices for lands that they develop, Mr. Speaker. And so, every meeting Proud has had in the community that I know about, I attend, whether I'm invited or not. This is my constituency, and I've added my voice to that issue. For too long, my people in this area, under successive administrations, under successive boards of NDC or Invest St. Lucia, and this is why, when we were in office, they had a certain CEO that used the very roads that I built for my people to try to go and demolish people's homes, and I stopped him. I stopped him. I really don't care which cabinet appointed him. I stopped him. They have built not one drain in my constituency, but you're busy using the same road that I have built for them to try to lower the purchasing price, and you want to go and bulldoze people's homes? Not at all. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to that. The member for Miku North, I see on page 584, head 52, section 45, subsection 3, line 0251, major repairs or rehabilitation of school plant. I see $20 million had been allocated. And I must tell you, through you, Mr. Speaker, that the Bens-Laguas Combined School is in need of intervention. The Auger Combined School in need of intervention. The Labrie Boys Primary School in need of intervention. The girls' school, it was not rehabilitated very, very long ago, but I'm sure there can be some minor interventions there. So I'm hoping that $20 million could go a long way in assisting us in terms of taking some concrete action. In the public sector, according to the 2018 Economic and Social Review, total construction expenditure by the public sector is estimated to have contracted by 30.8% to $116.8 million in 2018. This downturn reflected lower expenditure by both the central government and statutory bodies in 2018. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, had the Prime Minister implemented the following projects, growth could never have been a dismal 1.5%. And everything is sensitive to context, Mr. Speaker. Everything is sensitive to context. When you stop the falling highway, you found a major arrangement between the Kuwaiti administration and the former SLP administration. You just deviate from that. We had the major thoroughfare coming into Castries and the West Coast Road arrangement. Stop! The highway from Dennery, exploring from Dennery to Grosile. And the Hiwanora International Redevelopment Project. Mr. Speaker, everything was fine with the World Bank for us to start the project. You got out of the World Bank situation, then you come to get a loan from Taiwan, and you believe getting a loan from Taiwan is better. So the whole thing is delayed. So we're getting close to elections. The UWP will pretend that they are building airport for the people of the South and try to make some political mileage. That's not going to work. So, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance has failed miserably in growing the economy to the desired level because he aborted the projects that I mentioned. And in some instances, creating unnecessary fiscal challenges. And I alluded to the airport. And the Prime Minister knows my position on that airport, and DSH in particular. He knows my position. I don't mince words when I speak about DSH, this airport, and St. Jude's. I don't mince words when I speak. Mr. Speaker, stopping the Hiwanora International Airport redevelopment with the World Bank in favor of a loan from the Republic of China and Taiwan is bad fiscal management and has created greater fiscal risk for this country. Mr. Speaker, it is fiscally irresponsible of the Prime Minister to pursue a loan with Taiwan instead of the arrangement with the World Bank for the following reason. One, a US $175 million is a major investment to expand and upgrade Hiwanora International Airport, which the country could avoid at this time, given its high debt to GDP ratio. Matching the provision of airport capacity with the demand while achieving and maintaining airport profitability and an adequate level of customer satisfaction is a difficult task. 3, it is made particularly difficult because investments to expand airport capacity are lumpy, increasing effective capacity by much more than is needed in the short run, and because they must be planned long in advance. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the airport at Hiwanora has not reached its capacity in terms of the number of passengers it can accommodate per annum. The issue is at peak periods, there is a problem. At peak period, there is a problem. Most of the time, the airport is there without activity. It's needed. And I'll tell you why it's needed. When you expand airport, you have to know what you're doing because it's a major undertaking. Because uncertainty is inherent in developing and operating complex infrastructure and services projects like airport. And it is for this very reason that government officials seek public-private partnership partners to mitigate complex risk. Hence, the arrangement we had with the World Bank was soundly based, and it was for fiscal risk to be effectively mitigated. And finally, privatization of the airport could have brought in much needed additional private money into the country to help with that situation. So today, we would not be in this house talking about 1.5% growth. Like I said, everything is sensitive to context. And this was not a Labour Party invention. This is what experts in the field have well established. A typical example is Norman Ashford and Clifford Moore in the publication Airport Finance. They said, and I quote, "The pressure to move airports out of the public sector is widespread throughout the world, and the international financial markets will become even more important in the development of airport financing." It continued on page 66, and I quote, "In terms of lending volume, the World Bank Group is the largest agency in the world, providing financial and technical assistance to developing countries. In all loan and credit transactions, major emphasis is placed on project appraisal. The procedures used are designed to ensure a satisfactory rate of return on investment and a high priority of the project in a general development program." The publication, Air Transport Infrastructure. So the literature supports what the Labour Party was doing. It is not just a political decision because we saw Barbados or Jamaica do it. That's the way to go. The air transport infrastructure, the roles of the public and private sectors, infrastructure, economics and finance network, the World Bank, it states, and I quote, "Private operation of airports has disclosed substantial efficiency gains. For example, better and longer use of existing assets. Often, however, the sector has performance and fiscal risks that need to be carefully managed by governments." So, Mr. Speaker, the fact is, when we look at Hiwanora, despite the fact that it can accommodate many more passengers per annum, outside of the peak period, we can encourage flights to come there. There are certain things that are just not right. The control tower, archaic and outdated. We definitely need a technical block for the Met officers and the air traffic controllers. We definitely need it. We definitely need another airport. But when you build a bigger terminal, you are increasing the unit cost. And this is what Professor Doganis had to say, a seminal figure in air transport economics. And I quote, "Major development programs push up unit cost. A major new terminal has to be cooled, heated, lighted, cleaned, and maintained. And even with the number of passengers using it well below the design capacity." So you do not wait until the terminal has reached capacity to plan for another terminal and build it. And that cycle normally takes between 5 and 10 years. So that's the point. Now, Mr. Speaker, the dual airport operation is not making any type of profit for anybody to jump about. But you want to undertake an expansion, a major expansion to Hiwanora. It makes perfect sense to allow the World Bank to do it. Let the World Bank do it. After the $175 million, you know how much more you might need? Do you know how much more money you will need? And when the master plan was done, was it done for the location that you have chosen? Because I saw a location that's different to where the master plan originally located the airport. And if you're going closer to the river, then that's another set of issues. So what do? After you're going to undertake it, you come back and say you need 100 million US again? Where will that place our country? Mr. Speaker, another very important aspect of the development is the St. Jude's Hospital reconstruction project. The government decided to abandon the St. Jude's project, and I'm seeing in the estimates some over 100 million, and I stand corrected. I saw some millions of dollars, but some were estimated total project cost. I don't know if it was combined with what was spent before, but we didn't spend 100 million. There is money there to build, to complete St. Jude's. That is not being done. There is money to complete St. Jude's. That's not being done. They are all over the hospital site with major sewer systems that connect with other parts of the south. They are cutting around buildings that are there. All four sides, they cut around it. And they have heavy rollers rolling it, hoping as if the foundation of those buildings will crack so they can demolish the buildings instead of completing the structures. And Mr. Speaker, that is fiscally irresponsible to go and invest so much money in St. Jude's when the buildings are there. So they are busy mashing up the roads, digging the area, removing soil, go to the Black Bay River, open it up, then in the PI River, taking and bringing sand on the other side. And they want to blame other people. Mr. Speaker, to complete St. Jude's, you don't have to do that. To complete the St. Jude's Hospital, you do not have to undertake what is being done at this time. Complete the hospital and move the people there. No, you want to give it to a private concern. You want to demolish our buildings? Well, Mr. Speaker, I am making it absolutely clear again to the Prime Minister. We are not going to allow occupation of our buildings by any medical school or any university hospital. And I have said before in this House that the people are mobilized. They are fully mobilized, and we are going to oppose it. And I am saying in this chamber that people listen in real time to the contributions in this House. And persons who really want to go ahead and make deals with the government in terms of signing arrangements to come and take over a hospital, supposed to hear that the people of the country are vehemently opposed to those arrangements. So why pursue it with the government? When as soon as we get into office, we'll be reviewing those arrangements, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure side, according to the 2018 Economic and Social Review on page 51, said capital spending by the central government is projected to contract by 15.3% to 213.4 million in 2018-2019, the lowest since 2008-2009. And that was a very difficult period globally, that period. And it is said that capital expenditure today is definitely in the sphere of comparison with a period of recession. Mr. Speaker, this outturn reflects delay in the commencement of major grant finance projects, according to the Social and Economic Review. Mr. Speaker, while I could appreciate the explanation provided, I agree with the member for Vieux-Fort South that there are worrying signs that St. Lucia may not be enjoying the full confidence of investors who are willing to invest in government's long-term instruments. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I refer you to page 51 of the 2018 Economic and Social Review, which states, the growing stock of central government debt and marginally higher interest rates led to a 5.5% increase in interest expenses to 171.3 million in 2018-2019. This represented 13.4% of total expenditure and 14.7% of current revenue. It continued, Mr. Speaker. In an attempt to reduce refinancing risk of the debt portfolio, maturities were lengthened as some treasury bills were replaced with treasury notes with a corresponding increase in interest payments. You see, Mr. Speaker, when investors start to lose confidence in a government, it becomes more expensive to borrow. So you have to offer higher rates for them to bite. So it makes borrowing more expensive for the country. If we are in a recession, Mr. Speaker, where the private sector is afraid to invest and people are holding on to their money, it's a good time to borrow because the government is in control of the rates that it's going to offer. So you borrow cheaper in that arrangement. But when they're busy doing papi show in the country, it becomes very costly for us to service our loans. And you'll see in a few moments, Mr. Speaker, the danger associated with that. For the upcoming fiscal year 2019-2020, the government is proposing to borrow in the vicinity of 330 million, am I correct? In that vicinity, which will tax the fiscal position of the country. The most likely impacts are, Mr. Speaker, interest cost will grow rapidly. And let us look at what the Social and Economic Review is saying. On page 56 of the 2018 Economic and Social Review, it states net total debt service payments dipped by 0.4% to 281.6 million in the calendar year 2018, accounting for 24.4% of current revenue compared to 27% in 2017. Interest costs are projected to climb significantly over the period 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, 24.4% is very high. To take almost 40% of your revenue to pay interest costs is not a good scenario. And because they couldn't raise all the money, so that capital expenditure went down. So they were forced to narrow. The fiscal deficit just narrowed by itself automatically. It just worked out automatically. That they have high fuel prices, they make a lot of money, they change the cap, and the investors did not have full confidence in the government, so they couldn't borrow as they could, so it narrowed the fiscal deficit. That was an incidental benefit that accrued. Now, at the rate the government is going, do you know that interest cost might go over 30% in quick time? And when you do that, many important priorities would have to be sacrificed, Mr. Speaker. Key investment in our future are at risk. Higher interest costs could crowd out important public investments that can fuel economic growth. So you see what is happening to us, Mr. Speaker? Priority areas like education and infrastructure will suffer. But I guess they don't care that. They don't care. They will do as they please. But there are outer limits beyond which this government will not be allowed to go with those type of behavior. In addition, growing government debt reduces the amount of private capital for investment, which hurts economic growth and wages. A nation saddled with debt will have less to invest in its own future. I remember some time ago when I stood in this house and I said that by the government coming and borrow locally, it is crowding out private investment. The Prime Minister disagreed. Mr. Speaker, if somebody has $1,000 to invest and they invest it in government bonds instead of investing it in a business, they cannot have that same $1,000 that they bought bonds to invest in something else. So it will automatically crowd out private investment. And the government does not want to do that. We must grow the private sector so that we can redefine the role of the public service. That is how it must be done. Less flexibility to respond to crisis. When you load our country with debt, interest payments become probably the third, second, maybe become the first category at the rate it's growing. From your revenue paying, you have no space. If there is a major disaster, what do we do? How do we respond to deal with unexpected events? Protecting the safety nets, Mr. Speaker. If you are on an unsustainable fiscal path, it threatens the safety nets and most vulnerable in our society. But what UWP care about most vulnerable in the society? What they care about that for? Because most of our social programs, most of what they found, they sacrificed it nice. They slaughtered it. The women are not smiling anymore in the smiles. They had programs to take care of them. No. They promise much, and most of the supporters, what they're giving them, they criticize the STEP program. Most of the people, that's where they find in a little place for them, supervising STEP or doing something. What has happened? Where are the toilets you build for them by the grass? You know, we were criticized. We need to move away from that, Mr. Speaker, and do what is necessary to help the people of this country. So yes, So this is why, Mr. Speaker, we are currently fashioning new economic policies to rescue St. Lucia from this government. A government which is pregnant with reckless desires, because a solid fiscal foundation leads to economic growth. That is how you lead to economic growth. But with all that risk with expenditure, it rests against what type of revenue? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and his chosen cabal have been beating the chest about increases in revenue. But what the Prime Minister will not readily appreciate is that this revenue intake is predicated upon massive vulnerabilities. For example, Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants trended upwards mainly because of CIP receipts and growth in our source tourism markets. Both revenue bases are vulnerable. The 2018 Economic and Social Review on page 9, and I quote, significantly higher CIP receipts contributed to a projected 6.4% increase in total revenue and grants to $1.2 billion in 2018-2019. On the tourism, Mr. Speaker, it said that tourism grew in this country because of robust economic growth in the United States of America, because there was growth in the UK market, it grew, and of course in the Caribbean, it grew. And whilst I speak about the Caribbean market as the second largest, the issue of LIAT comes into sharp focus. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia cannot continue to just criticize LIAT. LIAT was chartered to provide inter-island service, providing a social good, a public good. You must now look at the net benefit to the country, the same way we can give monies to foreign carriers, to private airlines. You can assist LIAT, negotiate with LIAT. Mr. Speaker, according to the 2018 Economic and Social Review, page 33, international crude oil prices remain volatile while trending upward throughout much of 2018. In 2018, the annual average domestic retail price for gasoline increased by 10.8% to 13.57% per imperial gallon, whilst diesel prices rose by 18.4% to $13.36. The price cap on gasoline and diesel prices both rose from $12.75 per gallon on July 2017 to $13.95 in June of 2018. So they have increased the tax burden on the people of this country. And I said so before, the fiscal illusion, imposing taxes on people and making them believe you lower the VAT to 12.5, a 16% reduction, but you put 150 on each gallon of gas, which is a 60% increase. So people will say, well, they reduced the VAT, and that is good. You'll continue to increase the tax burden. Look, you'll already removed the cap. And who knows what's going to be done tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I speak about the vulnerability of both tourism and, of course, CIP, which we have no direct control over. And this is what the IMF has warned us about. And in its publication, The Caribbean from Vulnerability to Sustained Growth, on pages 6 to 7, makes it abundantly clear, and I quote, the emergence of tourism as the dominant sector in the economies in the region has also created new vulnerabilities to global shocks, such as a sharp increase in petroleum-related products, which can disrupt international travel and intensely affect any number of tourism and tourism-related services and events. The region's small economies are completely dependent on imports for the supply of petroleum products, and even a small shock to these prices can make a large difference to government finances and domestic production, unquote. 2018 economic over tourist arrivals. However, external shocks can alter this scenario. For example, page 15 of that same Economic and Social Review captures this uncertainty very well, in keeping with the loss of Condor flights arrivals from Germany dropped by 25%. Just a decision by the airline to pull out. Arrivals from Germany dropped by 25%. It continued, Mr. Speaker, on the same page. Mitigating the positive stay-over arrivals growth was a decline of 5.6% in arrivals from Canada to 40,213 in 2018, after peaking in 2017. The loss of air seats from Air Transat's winter service and the reduction in frequency of flights by WestJet from Toronto and Montreal overshadowed the increases in air capacity from Air Canada and Sunwing Airlines. At this juncture, I want to conclude this discourse on those vulnerabilities by again invoking the authority of Professor Doganis in his publication, The Airport Business. Airport authorities must invest substantial capital sums in large and immovable assets that have no alternative use to satisfy a demand over which they have very little control, except very indirectly. It is the airlines and not the airports who decide where and how the demand for air travel or air freight will be met. Airports merely provide a facility for bringing together airlines and their potential customers. So here is what has happened, Mr. Speaker. The government continues to borrow heavily, and they are depending on vulnerable sources of revenue. Revenues that they have no control over. Instead of allowing the private sector to undertake investments that the private sector should undertake, they're busy borrowing to increase the debt of the country. Mr. Speaker, many more minutes. Half an hour? Mr. Speaker, I wish that the honorable member for Castle Central was present. Because last night, when she made her presentation, she spoke about reports and about the number of reports on the Ministry of External Affairs, etc. I think we will deal with those issues in the policy debate. But maybe, and this is what I was expecting the honorable member to say. When we were in office, we made appointments, normal appointments. We were criticized. The Ministry of External Affairs had all sorts of problems. The External Affairs Ministry was the cause of our fiscal problems. And I had, cocktail ambassadors. They were insulted, men and women that were representing the country. They called them all sorts of names. I had 3 departments. I had the Department of External Affairs, I had the Department of International Trade, and I had the Department of Civil Aviation. And with my 3 departments, I did not have recurrent expenditure of 27 million. I did very minimal travel. I went to the UN once a year. I went to OAS, General Assembly, once a year. And every other year, we would go to an OAS summit. I go to CARICOM meetings as the member for the Minister for External Affairs. On the international trade side, I went to a trade meeting once a year and a Council of Ministers meeting once a year. That was the sum total of my travel in trade and, of course, at the CARICOM level, because that's where we coordinate trade and foreign policy. I traveled once to Korea, where I made a presentation on renewable energy and got support for geothermal exploration in St. Lucia. They were favorably disposed to pursuing it. I signed diplomatic relations with New Zealand and a cooperation agreement that included assistance for geothermal energy. and New Zealand have been assisting St. Lucia. It was on the margins of an OAS meeting that I was able to engage with the Mexicans to get $13.32 million for the Dennery Water Project. We kept it foreign affairs to foreign affairs. The entire gestation period was done between the two ministries, because I've always said probably we need to establish cooperation at the Ministry of External Affairs so that we can have our cooperation agreements and actually drive it from our ministry. So in many respects, there are a lot of disconnects. Like the minister rightly said last night, the member for Kaswi Central said. But one thing, the officers were getting training. We did not have the best arrangements, but they were going, you know, to Mexico.
Honorable member, you have 10 minutes in which to complete.
I didn't say you said anything. You just came in, said.
Honorable member, always speak for the chair.
So, Mr. Speaker, when we inherited a fiscal deficit of 10%, all the vehicles at my ministry, they were just breaking down. We put just a request for one vehicle from the Ministry of Finance. They crossed it out. And it was on that one visit during my entire period as foreign minister. I negotiated with the South Koreans. And I got 3 vehicles for my ministry. And another 2 vehicles, the ones that I went to Hong Kong. I went to Italy to moderate a session of the UN. As foreign minister, I was very much involved in the climate change and sustainable development conversation, that I was one among 50 ministers. One among 50 foreign ministers that were chosen for UNDP at 50. I signed a cooperation agreement with Morocco for fertilizers for the farmers. The honorable member knows that very well. Scholarships. Before my time, and it never came. How many, not even a small bag of fertilizer came. What are you talking about?
Honorable member Library, speak for the chair.
But you must caution him, you know.
You're not supposed to pay attention to him.
You must caution him. Tell him that the honorable member for Library has the floor. And the member must be heard in silence. Tell him so. So you see, maybe we should start by saying whether or not the Ministry of External Affairs is getting enough in terms of expenditure. I know we are a small economy. Let us try to see how we can assist the country in curing some of the economic and social challenges. And see what is required. And look at the net benefit to the country. This is where we have to go. So in that particular debate, I just wanted to confine my discourse to those things. And you know, Mr. Speaker, in that short period, I was very pleased that I had the unsurpassed glory on behalf of my country to serve internationally and regionally in a number of positions, including the President of the Council of Ministers of the ACP, chairing the Trade Committee, being chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of both CARICOM and the OECS, as well as the Trade Committee of CARICOM. I'm sure when the honorable member came in and inherited the portfolio, we were still on course to chairing COTED. So, Mr. Speaker, it was not just about traveling, like people say. That's why I've always been reluctant to stand here and accuse anybody of traveling. Ministers must travel. Ministers must travel. Ministers must attend to the country's business. But after 3 years, I want to hear what all those travels have brought to us. And I'm hoping that in the debate on the policy, I will hear the achievements of the country. But for me, after 3 years, I think it's a good time. It's a good time for the 2 ministers in that ministry to tell us what were the strategic priorities and what we achieved. It's not every time a minister travels that they have to come back with a fire engine or they have to come back with something. Sometimes it takes time to develop relationships before they can give birth to tangible results. And you cannot do that by sitting at Baywalk or by sitting at the waterfront. You need to go to places. We don't have too many embassies overseas, so we have to go there. And when I came in, and I'm proud to say that when I came in as foreign minister, I never fired any ambassador or consul general and tell him get out. I never did that. But as soon as they got into office, and there was an early election, so that's why a number of months was still on the contract. Oh, you know, and in the manifesto about party hacks and this and that, look at what's happening to the various outlets. But you have not heard me attack anybody. Anybody's wife, anybody's husband, anybody this or anybody that. You have not heard my voice on that issue. Now, the last time I spoke in this honorable house, in the motion of no confidence, and I said that the Prime Minister took the liberty of going and joining the Lima Group. And Mr. Speaker, there was objection from the member for Castle Central. When I said there was no cabinet conclusion, you asked me to withdraw the statement. When I said that there was no cabinet conclusion. And at the time, Mr. Speaker, I told you I will withdraw in the interest of time. And the reason why I said I'll withdraw in the interest of time is because if I say something does not exist, I cannot show it to you. It is incumbent upon the member for Castle Central to present the proof that this is the cabinet conclusion. And unless they just made that cabinet conclusion, there's no cabinet conclusion like that. The member for Labrie states categorically in this house that there's no cabinet conclusion. And I'm hoping in the policy debate it's not too late for us to see that particular cabinet conclusion. So, Mr. Speaker, when I examine the estimates of expenditure, I don't know whether I missed it, whether I need glasses. I didn't see anything written for Labrie. I didn't see anything in the estimates to acknowledge that Labrie is part of St. Lucia and that there was, yes, nothing at all. It was not mentioned. So I want my constituents to know. However, as taxpayers, I have made certain requests and I will continue to work. And the Carter people, I want you all to know that I will start the ball rolling. I will be coming on that road and I'll start grading it either next week or week after next. Because next week, next week, if God's spare, win policy debate. If I don't have time, the following week, I'm going on that road and I'm grading it. Mr. Speaker, I must take you there. This is the worst road in the entire world. Entire world. And I've waited for intervention. I said I lead by example. I lead by example. You can't have no road in Dennery as bad as that. When you go in the craters that's on the road, if the member for Choiseul is standing in the crater, you ain't seen his head, you know. And I have, you know, I never come to the minister like a boss, you know, like I control his ministry and tell him, I want you to come and do roads for me. I don't talk to big men and big women like that.
How do you want to talk to us?
I don't. I come, I respectfully request. But you see, there's a certain period where I have to take matters into my own hands. I'll go and grade and roll it. And I want you all to come in now to put the sub-base, the blended crusher run, and I want you to give it a double surface dressing. Yes, so I'm going to scarify the road. Yes, definitely, and that's where you come in, honorable member, for Cassis North. And if you don't do that in quick time, you will not be able to come to the People's Republic of Labrie. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm being provoked. I need your protection, Chair. Mr. Speaker, how many minutes I remain? 10?
You should be wrapping up, honorable member.
20, Mr. Speaker?
No, you should be wrapping up. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I have made it clear that there's nothing to celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate. And I know by the body language coming here, they were not convinced of that morbid scenario. See that kind of picture? But they had to try a thing to impress the boss, to impress the Prime Minister who is standing up for you. But no amount of beating of chest and no amount of standing up will change the abysmal performance of this government. We are in a bad place economically. So, Mr. Speaker, now the grand lie of the UWP is in ashes. Everyone knows that if policies followed in the last 3 years are to continue into the future, public debt would rise to extreme levels and endanger macroeconomic stability further. Because, Mr. Speaker, the scope for sustaining such expansionary fiscal policies is limited. So even all the grand charge about how much they're going to borrow, that would depend on the appetite of investors for that kind of bond. And they are monitoring what is happening in St. Lucia. And it might be very difficult for us to be able to buy bonds because high debt to GDP ratio narrows room for fiscal maneuver. And that's a fact. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a sad day for us. It is the worst I have seen it in my entire period in this Honorable House. And I'm not saying that because I want to attack anybody. It's just the facts. And we are going to come back here next year, if God spare, Mr. Speaker, to see the economic picture, to see what happens to capital expenditure, to see what happens to all the boasting that was going on in this chamber. So, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of Labrie, I have made my contribution, and the people of Cartin just look forward to the grader and the roller sometime either next week or week after next. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.